Hi, I'm Ruth Johnston, and I wrote Speak Like Rain, an introduction to poetry for your homeschooled high school student, but really for anybody who's interested in studying poetry on their own. I had two different students in mind when I wrote it. There's the student who's enthusiastic about poetry, they already know a lot of poems, and they really want to know the details. For them, I've got a lot of history and trivia, poems they may not have seen before, and interesting, challenging questions. Then there are the students who really are only doing this because they have to, and their greatest fear is that the homework will say, "What does this poem mean?" and they'll have nothing to write. What matters most to them is that the homework and the book should be doable, something they can actually do. For both students, but especially for them, there's a very detailed answer key that can be used like a conversation with the teacher, and I think it really should be used that way. I chose the title Speak Like Rain because of a story in the memoir Out of Africa. Karen Blixen, who was studying Swahili, talks about making up Swahili nonsense rhymes, and the little boys who were listening thought they were really funny, and they would ask her to make up more of them, and they would call it Speaking Like Rain, and they would say to her, "Speak like rain, please speak like rain." She said she didn't know why they said rain, but it meant that they liked it, that there was something in it that they were hearing that was a spontaneous joy, the way rain feels in Africa. They weren't impressed with it as literature. They didn't see it as an academic subject that they had to learn. And that innate joy in sound artistry and in poetry as artistry is something that I wanted this book to try to bring to the students. In fact, the book begins with a definition of poetry. What is poetry? Poetry is art made with words. The rest of this book is about what that means. And so we go on. Why do we make art? What is art? Why do we study art? Why should you study an art that you can't do? And then the parts of word art. Word art is broken into sound and image. So about 2/3 of the book studies the different sound artistry things: rhythm, meter, rhyme, repetition, and variation, and all of the different forms that those things add up to. Then the book goes into imagery, word pictures, and the different ways they're used to tell a story, to convey an idea, to make a reference. At the end, the book presents the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner in its full form. Let's see if I can flip right to it. Because in this poem, we really see a lot of things that we've been studying. The student can write about the rhythm, the rhyme, the pictures in it, the story that's told, the ideas in it. And the book at this point really has prepared them to write a 5 to 10 page paper about this. So if your student needs to write a 5 to 10 page paper for English, Speak Like Rain will prepare and assign that paper. You'll have to correct it, of course. Another thing that's really different about this book is that since I'm also an enthusiastic poet, I used some of my poetry. Here you see one of mine on the same page with one of T.S. Eliot's. I'm not trying to say mine is anywhere as good as these great poets. But what's unique about it is that while we can speculate why T.S. Eliot wrote this set of words to be art, I can tell you exactly why I wrote this set. And here's a paragraph explaining what was the idea in my mind that made me want to make a piece of word art. And I try to do that through the book, both using my own poems and looking at why other poets may have written the things and made the choices they did. So we don't just say, this is what's in the poem, but then we say, when the poet wanted to talk about this subject, why do you think he chose to do it this way? How would it have been if they'd done it differently? Imagine that he added rhyme to the poem. Imagine the poem didn't have rhyme. How would that convey the idea differently? The homework sets are designed in a very particular way. The first homework set is a review from past things, so that the student should only be looking at what they've already learned And they're usually little lightweight activities to just go back and keep developing those ideas. Then the first exercise in the set is always an activity of some kind. In the example here on screen, we've got little examples of light verse called the Clerihew, which are usually biographical poems, little 4-line things. They rhyme, but they don't have any other stipulations as to meter. So I've taken some Clerihews from a 1905 book and have left blanks in them. So for example, it was a pity about blank, his insane jealousy of chickens. Well, the student has to think, what great writer's name rhymes with chickens? So of course, Dickens. And that's the way these all go. So it's an exercise about rhyme, but it's kind of funny. The rest of the set will be doing more traditional work, looking at poems, asking questions, assigning them for study. This one is about rhyme, and it ends with the entirety of the Raven. Here, it's important for the home teacher to understand that I've tried to present a variety of difficulty in the length of the poems, in the types of questions that are assigned. The full set may be too much for your student. It may be more than you want to do, and you should really feel free to just select a few and maybe just read the poems for the other ones. I also tried to do things sometimes in a funny way. So, for example, when I'm explaining about forms like the rondo and the villanelle, I made up goofy examples that illustrate exactly what the form of it is. They follow the rhyme scheme, but they were made out of scraps of the Raven. So this one says, while I pondered weak and weary, a bird was tapping on my door, once upon a midnight dreary. Its coloration was not cheery. I munched some tuna, albacore, while I pondered. Weak and weary, I searched for a solid theory to explain the football score. Once upon a midnight dreary, in a campground by Lake Erie, heavy rain began to pour, while I pondered weak and weary. It's complete nonsense. Student can laugh at it, but in the meantime, it focuses their attention on what this is really teaching. I'm not asking them at the moment to understand it. I'm asking them to see the format. Then it will present a real poem and ask them to help understand it. And eventually, of course, in the homework, they begin to see poems of these types that they can answer questions about. So that's really most of what I have to say about Speak Like Rain. I'd love to hear from you if you have questions about how this could fit into your home school, and look forward to answering those questions. I'd also love to hear from you if you use the book and there were things that your student particularly liked or even particularly didn't like. Please get in touch with me and let me know. Have a great week. Bye-bye.